I've been working with the CRM solutions for over 10 years. I've been working with Microsoft Dynamics CRM product for over 9 years right now. From a background perspective, I'm a solution architect, so I deal with sales processes, deal with the integrations, deal with the user acceptance, and one of the key things that I kind of use as my trick is start the process with the user adoption as a main goal. Because user adoption is a huge subject, a lot of times it's overlooked, and I think at the end of the day, if you have the system, whether it's Excel or CRM or anything else, if users are not using, that's kind of testament of something went wrong throughout the process. So I'm very excited to be here, happy to share my thoughts and my ideas, and feel free to engage with any questions you guys might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rokas.
So my name is Christine Chode. I work for ABC Laboratories. ABC Laboratories is a contract research organization. We provide services in the analytical support to companies who work in the pharmaceutical, agricultural, and chemical consumer products. So we actually service a wide range of companies. So it's often a struggle making sure that we understand our customers. And I've been a CRM administrator for ABC Labs for 4 years now. And I basically bridge the gap using the SIP system to integrate our different processes and how we reach out to our customers for the different industries. I started about 4 years ago taking over CRM after being a Dynamics user for GP, mostly because I understood our goals and our processes. Unfortunately, when I took over, it was a highly customized, complex integrated system, and it almost became a joke. Our users basically just saw it as a hindrance. Our data quality was 50% unreliable. Our management was frustrated, and it basically became my first goal when I took over to find a solution to that problem. The original thought was, well, what if we just get a new system? And ultimately, what I went back to management and told them, it's not about getting a new system. A new system doesn't fix the inherent problem of user adoption. And so one of the things that I immediately took on is discussing with the users what their pain points are and identifying why it is they didn't want to use the system.
Thank you. So if you could tell them about how many people you have on CRM today and how you're using it in a brief fashion.
Absolutely. So we are a company of about 400 people, and we have 84 users of our CRM system. It is basically the backbone of our communications with our customers, as well as internally between the different functional areas: business development, marketing, operations, operational support. So we use that in connecting with our clients as well as connecting internally with each other to make sure that we have the full picture of how we're interacting, to make sure that we don't miss out on any of the information that is needed, because who really wants to go into a meeting after somebody else has already had another one and not have all the information? And CRM really helps with that.
What would you say was your first step in the user adoption process, and how did you get buy-in and acceptance from those users in that step?
So, like I said, our users just thought CRM was a big brother tool, and people were just watching them, making their process more difficult. Why did I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? And what I identified is what you really need to start with is understanding your business processes as a whole. So at that point, you've got to start making a decision. Is your process what is defining your CRM, or is your CRM defining your process? And what I discovered is that when CRM was originally rolled out and people were trained, the CRM defined our process. And unfortunately, the way that our sales and our business development and our other teams were working, it did not fit. So I sat down with each of the functional teams. I found where all of those systems, sort of those business processes intersected, and we made a plan to move forward in how to implement a new CRM that allows CRM to support the business process, not dictate it.
Okay. Rokas, can you add something? that discussion?
Sure. So from the other side, I guess, of the table, we're a consulting company. So a lot of times I work and I sit across the table for people like Christine, and I can tell you one thing, that when I have somebody on the other side of the table, of a team member who has experience like Christine, who understands the processes, I can bring that value to those conversations. The projects definitely go smoother. The projects definitely go and then set proper goals and focus on proper things. So from my perspective, as a consultant, when we step in an organization, or as a project leader when you try to do something, it is very important to have right people who can help you to define those processes. And even when you start defining the processes, one of the key things that Christine said in here is intersection of different processes. So a lot of times, marketing will come back and say, we want a CRM system. We start digging, well, why do you guys want a CRM system? Because we want a sales and everybody else to be more effective. Well, now we're talking about different layers within the same organization who potentially have input in the process. And if we just focus on one area, marketing, well, that's kind of process that starts in the middle, ends in the middle, and everybody else is left out. That's a problem. So usually our recommendation is to kind of go in, identify high-level elements, build a core team, so to speak, make sure that you have right people at the table, and then start identifying what are the priorities, what are the processes you want to focus on, and like Christine said, really flesh them out to understand what is the impact. Is it a huge project, small project? Can we fit this in one phase? Is this two-phase project, three-phase project, and so forth? And you go back to the users and continue conversations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick, I do want to elaborate on that, on something that he said. You really need to define your priorities when you're working with your users. A lot of them, if you just, even within a core team, if you just go, what do you want, you're not going to get what they really need. And the way that I sort of approach that is by identifying what their end goal and working backwards.
Awesome. Thank you. Any questions?
So, a couple questions. You mentioned data was at 50% usable, and so I'm curious, how long did it take you, and what process did you go through to clean up that data? And then, what was the tipping point from an adoption standpoint? So, after the data was clean, right, then people trust the information, but what kind of tools and information did you finally make available to them to flip them over, to get them out of that big brother mentality?
So actually, it wasn't necessarily about implementing tools. What I did was an overhaul of our system because we had a lot of required fields that it wasn't information anyone was using. So I sort of went down the list and touched all of the different teams. So as he was talking about, we had a core team that was made up of the sort of team leads of the different functional areas, and then we had each individual team. So I went to the teams and asked them, how are you using this data and is it needed? And I was actually able to clean out quite a bit of information that we were requiring our teams to provide that nobody was using. So that's why I really like to ask the question, what's the end goal? Because you should never put anything in your CRM system that you're not going to use somewhere else in making a business decision.
How long did that process take?
The first time it took about 2 years.
Okay.
And the real problem with that is, like I said, we started from a system, it hadn't been touched in 6 years. So when I took over, our system had not had any updates or modifications or anything like that. The old CRM administrators take on is use the system as it is. This is how you're supposed to do it. And so that became a real problem. So people, as people do, when they come up against something that's not working, they either don't use it at all, or, like I said, that was part of our data quality problem. People were putting in inaccurate information just to get through the system.
That question?
Yeah, how fully are you using the system today? Are you using it for your short campaigns, your campaigns? Are you running reports and doing metrics off of it for performance? Is it fully embedded in operational in all aspects of the business, or do you find it really lends itself to certain aspects of your business better than the entire suite?
So when I started, we were actually, and still are, we're in the process of transitioning. For marketing purposes, we were using an outside system, and that created sort of a issue between the systems because they had trouble talking, and that with the new Dynamics marketing and CRM tools for marketing improving, it's becoming much easier within CRM to do the marketing pieces. So we're bringing that back in-house. Our business development and our quote teams use it 100% for the day-to-day operations. And actually with Turnkey's help, we're even going to boost that up and sort of increase our turnaround time. The one place that we haven't rolled out the functionality for is everybody, I don't know if you know about the cases functionality, we have a program management team. So after our contracts come in, it kicks off to the operational teams, but each quote has a project manager that is responsible for the follow-up communications as a study seeks itself through the product development. That's the one area that I've struggled with rolling out the functionality to, simply because of some of the regulatory issues that we face with EPA and FDA. So it really is based on your industry, but quite frankly, I don't see an area in most businesses where CRM can't be helpful, or at least connected to a system. And that's what we do right now to facilitate that. So there are a lot of validation issues with regulatory agencies, but we are able to pass information from CRM, which keeps the issue of manual processing low.
Awesome, thank you very much, appreciate that. So we were talking a little bit about business processes to start the discussion, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about the front end, the planning part of it. So what do you feel is a key component to your success when you introduce a new technology like CRM into the environment?
Proactive planning, actually. Doing my research on the new features and functionalities, understanding how the benefit to the user is, that's actually where I start when I'm looking at the new functionality that Microsoft rolls out. Is I take into consideration how we're using CRM today, and I identify who the target audience is that would be using that, and I sort of start having a conversation with them and how we can integrate that into our process and if it'll make that feature better. So one of the things, the improvements for the product and pricing list that Microsoft have made, the suggestions and things, product groups and stuff like that, that is going to help our company immensely. That's one of our next big features to roll out with 2015 to our teams. Our team is looking forward to that a lot, mostly because right now when we develop a quote for our proposal for a client, our turnaround time is about 7 days. The industry average for our company type should be 3. So right now we're doing a lot of customization for individual client quotes that the features and functionalities within CRM is going to cut in half.
Thank you. Rokas, I know you have something to add to that.
Sure. Be careful what you wish for. I can talk.
Rokas is never at a loss for words.
Sometimes I stumble, but most of the time. So kind of taking a little bit different spin on Christine's answer. When we kick off the project, I typically ask customers, the project team, the core team, or expanded team, management, executives, whatever. I ask it, what is important to you? I mean, I will look in at this project. If we have to make some choices, let's talk about decisions. Let's talk about planning. I mean, obviously we can get into the weeds and talk about planning for certain features, certain reports, and how the reports will look. Are we going to use green color or red color or blue color? We can get into those details. But if you take it at the very top level, I ask, what is important to you? Dollars, budgets, schedule, or features? So when you think about it, making those 3 questions and asking those 3 questions and answering those 3 questions gives your team, your project team, a priority list. So if you are down in the weeds and you're trying to figure out if certain report should be part of the rollout or not part of the rollout, or if some users came back with some features that they would really like to have, but your priority is a schedule, maybe you actually can make a decision saying, look, we will roll out the things as we are, planning to roll them out, and then we'll add these next set of features later. On the other hand, like in Christine's world, well, if the priority is to cut the quoting time, let's focus on that first. Therefore, we can figure out what we need to do to make sure that we can achieve that objective, and then we can look to see what we need to do from planning perspective to figure out how does that affect budgets and schedule, and then figure out if we need to pull something back or actually stay on course with the plan. So going back to the answer, the planning is an important part because it trickles down through the entire process, and that affects the overall success.
Well, hold on to it. I got to follow up. Okay, you got to add something? Go ahead.
Yeah. When he's talking about planning, I do want to point out, though, that it is simply just a plan. And one of the things that I go through is my process, and right now we're in the middle of an implementation for CRM 2015, is I start with a plan, and we get users' feedback and things like that, but it will definitely change and evolve even within 2 months. And so where you start isn't always where you end up, and having a great partner like Turnkey has really helped me with that process.
Rokas, you had a very good answer and great information, but how does that relate to user adoption?
Well, I think everything relates to user adoption, because if you roll out the system that is not something that users embrace, you have an issue. You have to justify why you did what you did, and people are not using it, so your benefits and everything else is really a wash. So I think Christine really can talk a little bit more about that, because from one customer perspective, she kind of been through the life cycle, and she experienced the bad, the change, and looking forward to the future. So I'm sure she can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, like you said, if a user doesn't use the system, you've just got a very expensive piece of equipment or software sitting there, and eventually management gets very irritated. But being able to be honest with your users, so often what I do is I tell them, okay, yes, you want this functionality, but it could delay the process. And we sit down and with the core team, we decide what is most useful and beneficial to roll out first. And so almost always when I've rolled out a new implementation or upgrade, there are usually a second or third phase coming to that. So I get them the stuff that will get them the greatest benefit first, and then we can always, as most of you I'm sure know, CRM is highly flexible. We can always add and be changing as users are doing things. So I pick out the things that are needed and the have-tos, basically, and then you can always add as users are working through the system for the things that they have to do day to day. A specific example of it is with the quoting stuff. That'll be one of the big first things that we have to have. But I know my users have talked about being able to have editable grids in places that CRM doesn't have them now. And so that'll be something that'll come after we do the initial rollout.
Thank you. Any questions? That's a great segue into kind of the next theme, which is benefits to the users. So Christine, what do you believe is the most overlooked aspect of user adoption? Why is this helpful, and why do you think it's overlooked?
Ongoing user adoption. Basically, I think what is often overlooked is people roll something out, they get their users excited, they do their training, everybody's like, high five, yay, we're good. We do metrics, 3 months later, and we show the improvements, and then it dies. So one of the things that I learned, so the first time, that's what I did with implementing 2011 after 04, but after a while I realized that some people were struggling. So I implemented sort of formal quarterly feedback meetings with my team in the different functional areas to identify what the issues are. And what I'm often finding is that it's not necessarily an issue with the system, but that we've changed a process and I haven't been aware of that. So it's really about staying in tune with your changing business, because CRM has to grow with it.
So, from my perspective, I completely agree with Christine, because one of the first things we always say, look, no, you can buy the system, you can buy the tools that you think you're going to use right now, and realistically, within a year, few years, 3 months, you possibly will be looking at different flavor of that of that system that you just implemented. So one of the great benefits for the Dynamics CRM is that you can actually take that system and morph it in the way you want it. You want to add some additional fields, some additional views, some additional things to make users' life a little bit easier and make it more personal. You can do it. As a system administrator, you can also do the same kind of things for the personal level, so you can teach your users. So from my perspective, I'm looking at innovation as one of the key elements from a benefit perspective, because your company is always growing. Your users will change the processes. You also will have different users in organizations, so you might roll out the system to one set of users, and now you completely have a different set of users. Maybe new division, maybe new leadership, maybe new team members, and everybody will have their own ideas how to improve the business. So being open to that innovation and then actually sitting down with the users and showing how the things benefit them, getting their feedback, making the change really quick, that's one of the key elements of how you can help user adoption by showing the benefits. And then one simple thing, I mean, you never can sit back in the corner and say, yeah, we rolled out the system, we're live, we're good to go. You always have to go back in there, evaluate, get the feedback, analyze the feedback, figure out what actions and what decisions you need to make those decisions, roll it out, and start again. Because there's always an ongoing process. So from my perspective, one of the key recommendations for the successful project is to have people like Christine who potentially understands the business, understands technology, and can drive that change internally or assist with that change internally. So, thank you.
So the train is moving down the track. We've looked at business processes. We've talked about planning. We've talked about the benefits to the users and how to get them excited about the project. Now we're going to talk a little bit about actually getting them to use it, so the onboarding process. So following that theme, how did you get users up and running quickly? Did you use any incentives? And then lastly, what percentage of the overall project is focused on that particular area?
So I actually start before we even roll out, working with the users in the test environment, and showing them the changes that they've requested, and then making tweaks from there. And then when we've done the official rollout, we try to get everybody on site for training, but sometimes that's difficult. So I do initial training as a group, but then I do individual breakout trainings. And what I find best is I make them use the work that they're already doing. So the best way to train somebody isn't on a concept, it's having them use the system how they're going to. Because I've even within a rollout training found things that we still needed to modify just slightly often, that we hadn't thought about, because it's usually something just a little small that nobody's really thinking about at the time until they're actually using it. So I find that rollout training is really helpful if you do it from that perspective. Because like I said, I'm not a salesperson, I'm not a quote writer, I'm not a project manager with our clients. And so having them show me how they're using it really is helpful in training them. After that, like I said, I do quarterly follow-ups with them, but I'm always available for them to do in-office training or WebEx training for the people that we have off-site. So if there's something that they're struggling with or they don't understand how it fits the process, I sort of take that on to sit down with the individual user. Sometimes it helps in a group, but sometimes you really have to do that one-on-one to make sure that they're really understanding what's going on. And then I tried fun incentives once. We have semi-annual meetings that we do as a team on site, and so the best CRM user got a cupcake. That didn't really work. But one of the things that does work is making sure that your management is not only bought into the new CRM, that they make it part of their goals. So our management team with 2011 made it part of our team's goals to track different activities, or we set up different reporting so the sales team or the quote team can see where they are to the company's goals, so that it really ties the whole picture back together.
Rokas, you have anything to add on onboarding and your
No, I
experience?
have nothing to add. How much time do we have to chat about that?
Quick question.
Sure.
You said you have about 400 users for CRM?
No, we have 400 employees, we have 84 users.
So 84 users you would bring on site. How long do you need deployments?
We don't do, like I said, we don't do deployments very often, mostly because a lot of planning goes into it. We did 2011 and 2013, and that's mostly because of the time that it took me to get up to speed, since our 04 environment had been stale for so long. And then last year I started planning for the update to 2013, but then we decided just to sort of hop over that and move to 2015 because it provided more features and benefits that we really could use. 2013 had some improvements, but 2015 just sort of really gave us the best benefit.
Do you use the web-based client or the offline client?
So we're an on-prem environment, but we are internet-facing deployment because we do have a handful of sales team out in the field who aren't on site.
Thank you.
Now can I talk?
Yes.
So from a training perspective, I mean, one of the key things that I like to see in the project is start early. So when we talk about assembling a core team, assembling expanded team, that's when the initial training really takes place. I mean, we gather requirements, we talk about what they want to do from a process perspective, we talk about the benefits and other things like that, and then we build prototypes. So we start showing how to navigate the system, we start showing how to actually click through the things and understand what they're going to do. So we start training as early as possible because other thing that happens too, that core team will go and talk to the rest of the users. That expanded team will also talk to the users. So we kind of start the training very early, like Christine was saying. A couple of pitfalls on the training is that I'm involved in the pre-sales process and making sure that the goals of the project align with the customer's needs and that the functional and technical capabilities of the system can produce what the customer is looking for. And then when we get to the bottom line of the dollars and cents and start talking about budgets, one of the first things that kind of gets cut out is, well, we don't need that much training. Well, that's one big mistake, at least from my perspective. Let's get back functionality, let's get back some other things, but training is important. So having an organization understand that you kind of have to do that follow through. You have to make sure that not only one person who potentially will be trained the trainer kind of scenario, understand the system, you kind of have to make sure that more people in an organization understands what is going to happen. A couple other things is, management buy-in. So if we build a system and management is kind of somewhat on board, you roll out the system, you train, and users are excited, ready to go, and next thing that happens, management comes back, says, hey, here's Monday morning meeting. I know this report looks pretty from the CRM side, but I need some other additional things reported from somewhere else. So my point is, like, if you ask your users to actually do some additional things, doesn't matter how much you train them, doesn't matter how good the system is, you have a problem. So the training goes to the end users, but you also have to look into the company, look to see who are other people who are potentially influencing the use of the system. Maybe they're not direct users, but you actually have to make sure that you train them a little bit, you give them some coaching, you make sure that they are on the same page as the direction of the system.
Thank you. So Christine, how formal of a process did you have? Can you give some examples of what that process was? And then you mentioned earlier about that it's ongoing, it never stops. So can you elaborate as well as that in regards to your formal plan?
Sure. So I do have a formal training plan. When we do a rollout of new features and functionality, it usually involves training, making sure that the users come with their work that we can use as examples, which turns into them just doing their work. I also provide them with takeaway cheat sheets and guides. It's good to have a big manual, but nobody really wants to go digging through a big manual trying to figure out what they're going to do, and often it's just something really quick that they want to get to. So we have a team site that houses all of our cheat sheets that I put together, and it's just a very screenshot by screenshot walkthrough of how to do something. So that's my sort of formal rollout. to the team. But then I always have that informal touch. So email me, call me, let's set up a WebEx, come by my office, and I will sit with them and talk through what they're struggling with. If they're struggling, if they're not, that's awesome. And often what I find is it's not the CRM that they're struggling with, it's a change in the process that management has made that doesn't really make sense with how our business runs. And so that is when I become sort of a facilitator between how a user is using the system and the management, and trying to find a way to make it easier for the user to use the system while management still gets the reports that they need. And ongoing, that 50% of my job, 50% of my job is touching and feedback from the users to make sure that they're having an easy time using the system. The biggest complaint that I get from my users when I ask them why they're not doing something is that it's clunky. And literally that is always the word they use. And so trying to find a way to make that seamless is sometimes a little bit daunting, because it's not just about that user, it's about who else touches that process, what other functional areas touch that process, and it just takes a little bit of legwork and getting with those users to refine that process. And usually you can come to a middle ground, making sure that people are getting the information they need and that it's easy to gather.
So, from years of experience, I've seen processes formal, informal, and that 50% or even 60%, sometimes 70% hand-holding number seems very accurate. So you kind of have to continue that process. But as far as different mediums of supporting the rollout and supporting the functionality, I mean, I find videos works very well. The challenge with recording and clicking through and talking through segment of certain functional elements is that system is dynamic. It changes. Now you move some fields, introduce some workflow, something changed, now I have to reshoot the whole video. So if you kind of like that approach where you kind of have a full screen and then you can talk through it, sometimes PowerPoint presentation works well. If nothing else, keeping up-to-date documentation that is broken down in small segments, saying if you want to produce a quote, here's what you do. If you want to find the record, here's what you do. But the key in there is make sure that that is up to date, because once users start getting into the system, having some questions, if they're used to going to some place and looking for some documentation, but if that documentation is out of date, well, that kind of derails the whole train very fast.
Speaking of train, so the train's still going down the track, but it's coming to the end, and it's at the depot, and the users are getting out. So now we need to look at, was it successful or not? And everybody's always reaching out for that magical ROI. I'm sure your bosses, managers all throw at you. How do you define success? So Christine, how do you define success in either a quantitative or qualitative perspective?
So with my first experience of rolling out an upgrade with CRM, I wasn't really thinking about ROI. I was really just thinking, I've got to fix this problem. So I didn't identify my metrics ahead of time, and that's something that you really ought to do, and that's what I'm doing this time. I identified the areas that we needed to see improvement in, and I defined my metrics, and that's going to be different for every company, and it's going to be different for each functional area as well. So just the first time, I started looking at our data quality. So anybody who deals with data knows that it can degrade over time. And so it wasn't just about, okay, we've cleaned it up and the work is done. I put a system in place to evaluate the data quality on a semi-annual basis just to see where it's at. And that was really an indicator for me the first time that the users were in fact using the system. Also with 2011, it implemented the dashboards and reporting, and that was also helpful. So the management team got really excited when they were able to see dynamic reports of how our performance was going just by opening CRM and in that front screen. It's I love that also because I was able to get rid of an 84-page report that I manually put together just by implementing the reporting and dashboard features. Now that's where you start to get into sort of the user's issues with Big Brother, but just having a conversation with them about moving things forward and projections and being able to make changes to your business and how you're really using that data really eliminates that issue of Big Brother, because it's not about are you using the system, are you making the phone calls, are you sending the emails. It's about we see these things, it's relating to the conversion rates on the different opportunities, and we actually, once we were able to report on that, we saw an increase in our conversion rates. So just being able to identify the last time that somebody was followed up on a particular opportunity and then being able to gain that visibility because people were using the system and it was easier to use, we started seeing other numbers go up. And while I didn't, I can't 100% draw that to that, I think users buying into that really helps, because if they have a system that helps them do their job better, obviously you're going to start seeing improvements in other areas.
Thank you. Rokas, I know you've had a lot of successes in your long career, so maybe you can elaborate on some of those.
This is one of the areas that's really hard to answer, because when we start the project, I always try to ask the questions that you just talked about. Said, what is your projection? What you are after? And what are you looking to achieve? And what would be successful project versus not successful project? If we roll out the system and users are using it, is that successful? Or is it still making people happy that they have a system and they like the screens and everything else, but now your coding process takes twice as long? Is that successful? So from my perspective, I see that a lot of companies kind of step in and say, we have a problem, we have some issues we want to address, and then when you start looking back, if you're successful, you start seeing a lot of different things. So some companies, obviously, when you have a more transaction-based kind of environment, can measure the success very easily. If I have a phone call and it takes me 2 minutes to dig through the different systems before I can talk to the customer, that's a problem. Now, if we unify the system, put everything into one place, and now we can quickly interact with the customer right there. Now my call time is cut in half. My call center is much more productive. That is something we can very easily put some kind of dollar amount, cents, minutes, and so forth. On the other hand, if you have a system where users have to go through different environments to dig up customer data, and now you have an environment where there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of pressure to satisfy the customer, make sure that your users are providing good customer service to the customer, but they have to do so much work just to achieve that, they have challenges meeting the goals. So if you cut that out and you have one place where you make the user interface much easier, you make happier environment for the people to work with. Well, what does that mean? A lot of times also companies struggle with some internal, I would use probably political issues. Different companies will have certain barriers that are built within an organization and say, here's my data, here's your data, here's my customer. Once you start talking about the common goals, the user adoption, the processes, making sure that everybody understands that this is a system not to be a big brother, but actually help everybody, you try to potentially take those different barriers and eliminate them. So now you're creating a company with an environment where people understand that working together maybe is better than building your own little wall and saying, stay on your side, I'll stay on mine. So those kind of things you cannot really measure, you cannot really say that this is return on investment. And those kind of things, with a successful deployment, typically will show up, will manifest itself after you implement the system. So the question in here is really kind of a way to validate from a technical perspective, from a functional perspective, and even from a leadership perspective. Are we doing good on the system as a whole, and how did we do on the user acceptance, adoption? Because potentially you flesh out a lot of different things that you did not even know that you will be able to achieve when you started off with the project.
You can hold on to it for just a second. So
All right.
I'm a little disappointed. Christine talked about dashboards. And Rokas and I were a team, kind of like Abbott, Costello, famous teams are on, but we've been working on a dashboard of our own to track all of our CRM leads, opportunities. So yes, I'm part of the sales team to help companies like yours implement this, but I'm also a user. And so you didn't mention our dashboards and how successful that is and what that's going to mean to us from a sales perspective. So maybe you can add.
Well, it's not necessarily sales perspective. I mean, you can take any process, and one of the things that I always say from a project perspective, I say, look, CRM has certain modules built out, but you can always go and build some additional things. Build what is important to you instead of managing the things in Excel. So from our perspective, I mean, we are making sure that we are getting on the same page. So everybody's looking at the same data, same information, and that right there allows us to be focused instead of going in there and saying, you work on one deal, I work on another deal, here's communication I had. If we are looking at the same information, if we're looking at the same dynamic dashboard, if we make some changes, that information is fleshed out right there. It's available for me, available for Richard, available for executive and management team. Now everybody's on the same page. So just using a system as communication platform is a huge gain because that cuts out emails. So if I can go back to the system and update opportunity, update a project, we use actually the CRM system for dividing the work among developers, and we use that as a node platform. So my developers are not sending emails to us. So, across the board, we are increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of internal communication, but we're also cutting out time because I know that before 8 o'clock today, I had about 40 emails in my mailbox, and that was not, many of the internal emails, and there were customer emails, questions, and so forth. So if I have so many communication items that are coming out from outside of the organization, I definitely don't want to add additional items inside of organization. So we try to use the dashboard as a way to flesh out the things that needs attention and the areas that we need to focus on.
Awesome, thank you.
Are you happy now, Richard?
I am happy. You made my day. So, questions?
Question for Christine. You had mentioned that the data quality was an issue with your system and that you took some actions to improve that. What did you do specifically for that?
So after identifying the items that weren't needed, I removed those. And we also started putting certain fields further down the process where it made more sense to be captured. And that really helped. It also became about user adoption and getting our users on board and getting them bought in really helped with the data, because part of it was people would put information in there and then they wouldn't keep it up. One of the things that we do with our leads and opportunities is they each have a dashboard that shows their open leads, opportunities, activities, and things like that, and they're able to see what items are past due, which clients they need to follow up with, what leads marketing has assigned to them, and they haven't done anything with. And I'm able to do that without having to send them an email constantly, like Roka said, and they're able to do their work more efficiently. They're also able to find the information that maybe a client's put in on a form from our website quickly, and they're able to follow up on that. And just being more efficient in our process has really increased our data quality. Like I said, it was about 50% before, and I'd say our data quality is about 90%. Now, there's still some policing of that, but it's a lot less than it used to be.
Thank you. Us as an organization are going through that data cleansing ourselves. So we buy lists and then put the list in, and there's duplications and stuff. So as a team, marketing, sales, and the consulting side are helping out as well to go through, and some of it's just manual process and reducing the redundant data that's in there and duplication and trying to clean it up. So it's really an ongoing process to continue to do that, because next time you buy a list, guess what? You're going to duplicate things, and so you got to kind of clean it up. So
one other thing to add to what Christine was saying a little bit earlier about what relates to the processes. If you define the process and you say that these are the fields that we don't need right now, don't make them required. So if typically what I see is a successful implementation we'll have a process that will say, we will allow you to start light. And then really for you to get to the end goal, like what Christine's example, create a quote. You can start an opportunity. Start early, start doing, just capturing some basic things. And if you lose it, okay, well, that's fine. You just captured 5 fields. But then when you go throughout the process, start making more and more fields required, more information filled in, because at the end of the day, if you click the button and you have a report that gives you the details of how the proposal should look like, you have to have that information. And probably if you're going to be sending that to the customer, you will make sure that that information is accurate. So if you build a process that flows through, you will have accurate data. And obviously, lists and other things like that, that becomes different kind of effort. And I usually say, from a data integration perspective, data is one of the challenging things because you have so many variants, you have different systems and so forth. So when you start thinking about having a system that you kind of agree is a key element of where all the truth will be more or less viewed, displayed, and so forth, that discussion of what data is required, where is the data coming from, how it's translated, who's responsible for maintaining that, becomes a little bit easier. But once again, it goes back to defining the process, defining expectation, defining the sources, and executing those based on priorities.
Thank you. So the train stopped now, and we've gone through that process, looking at business processes and planning and onboarding and training. And then how do you define success and create metrics to identify those processes that you've gone through. So kind of gone through that whole process. At this point, I'm just going to ask for some last comments, closing comments on what we've talked about, and then we can open back up for some other questions if we have them. And then I've got a couple of slides just to kind of close the presentation. So Christina, if you would just kind of close as a summary.
Sure. Just over my experience and the things that I've learned is get used to phone calls and emails and what about this, and really think of yourself as sort of the mediator between the different functional areas, because CRM isn't just a sales tool. CRM is a tool to help you communicate information within your organization so that you can have better communication with your customer. So everybody has to understand its importance and how it will make their job easier. And that's one of the easiest things to do out of the whole process, is if once you understand what their goals are, Microsoft Dynamics is so flexible, and you know what I mean, they're improving things all the time. It is really easy to sell my users on how it's going to improve what they do and how they do it.
Awesome, thank you very much. Rokas?
My quick comment is keep innovating. I mean, the reality is that the economy, the competitive advantages and everything else becomes very important in today's world. So I'm looking at systems, and then the organizations who use those systems that are successful really embrace that innovation. Like Christina was saying, that the train never really stops. It stops, it pauses, and it goes back again and again and again. So you have to be open for your users, for your management and so forth, kind of go in there, ask the questions, talk about the things that are important, and figure out what is the next track going to look like. Is it going to be long, going to be short? Because that is just a reality, and having the right tool that allows you to do that flexible, with a lot of flexibility is important. That's why we work with the CRM, we work with Dynamics, because it's not a sales tool. It's a lot of different things that different organizations need, a lot of Excel documents that we say, we don't have to use that anymore, you're going to use it in here. And we think outside of the box. And even when we think inside of the box, think about what data you already have. We talk about, cupcakes. Well, that's one way to bribe your users. But other thing is, you have ERP data, you have transactional data, you have some other things. Can we take that data, can we summarize it, can we give it to the salespeople and say, here's your customer, here's a list of your customer, here is the list of the customers who bought last year but did not buy this year. Is that valuable information? If it is, I mean, some of the innovation doesn't have to be, let's go and buy a new tool, let's buy new ideas and some other things like that. Potentially, you can just look at what you already have, look for simple things, and implement those, make sure that everybody's on the same page, go from there.